UNICEF India Country Office, WHO India Country Office, and I'm so happy we have from Ministry of Health, Dr. Sumita Ghosh also joining us. Warm welcome to all the attendees of this live webinar. We are going to have frequently asked questions which are going to be addressed by experts from entire country who will join. And then we will also hear the experience from 3 of the states, how this second wave of pandemic is behaving for mothers and newborn. We all need to get together. We need to ensure that essential services for mothers and newborn are continued, even for children are continued during this time of pandemic. Also, we must allay fear and anxiety from the minds of the families, which I notice at this point of time. We need to communicate to them, and also we need to make sure as a healthcare professional that we do not do over investigation and over treatment for the patients. We need to follow scientific evidence-based information if we have to manage newborn babies who are going to be sick. So I'm so happy we have from Ministry, Madam Dr. Sumita Ghosh, who has joined. So may I request Madam to kindly say a few words to all the attendees and all the panelists. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Devrari, Mr. Luigi, Dr. Praveen, others who are present here today for this online frequently asked question sessions on perinatal impact of and care of COVID-19. As we know, the whole world and the country is passing for last 1.5 years and some more time. It is passing through a very ravaging medical emergency situations. So this group, mothers, pregnant mothers, as well as the babies, a very vulnerable group. And initially, it was the new information was coming out that it is they are not being impacted or they are not seriously impacted. But as the situation has evolved, we have seen as the disease has underwent various mutations, the virus underwent mutations, the disease, we have started understanding the disease. We have seen it is not so. There are many issues which are actually impacting the pregnancy outcome and the perinatal health of the neonates. So in this context, the WHO, UNICEF, and AIMS have come together for this, allaying the anxieties of the mothers, the families, the population, and also, sharing, disseminating information, their experiences. So this is a great opportune moment. I do believe this will go a long way. Talking about the Government of India's effort, we came out proactively as early as last year with guidances and essential service continuation to consolidate the gains which we have achieved over the years on RMNCA services. Then in May again we came out with another guidelines, how to, in detail, how to, depending on the prevailing situation that time, how to deliver the services. And there were detailed guidelines, but in short, it was declared that all services, RMHCA services, will be essential services, and there will be no continuity has to be maintained, and there will be no denial, no refusal from the system. So in that context, it happened. But the first wave, somewhere we could, limit it to the damages were limited. But this time, when it has come in with such vigor and such, menace, that we have to rethink our strategies. We have to again build upon on our experiences of past 1 year as well as the global evidences. The clinicians here, they will be discussing the pros and cons of clinical aspects. From public health point of view, I would say some non-negotiable, public health aspects, that mother-baby dyad, they interlinked. Their outcomes are interlinked and they are dependent on each other. So that has to be maintained. The dyad, as far as practicable, they need not be separated. Breastfeeding has to continue. KMC has to continue. Of course, family participatory care, depending on the circumstances, we might have to restrict somewhere. But the treatment and other aspects, the guidelines which we already have on neonatal care, that might need some, special adjustments that might have been done, but the basic principles remain the same. Often the neonates may be having atypical syndromes, and the questions here is, about knowledge, how transmission is occurring, what is to be done, what are the various kind of symptoms that we having, what kind of care has to be given. All these protocols all have to be discussed, and the experts are here to answer the queries of such a large audience which we have gathered online. That the other principles are COVID appropriate behaviors have to be maintained. The institutional mechanism has to be strengthened because this is an unprecedented situation. We have to strengthen all mechanisms which are existing to deal with the worst possible scenario in place. Infection control measures need to be strengthened, need to be looked into from the COVID prism. It has to be looked into, like the distances between the beds, the waste disposals. They need to look into PPE for the providers. Again, that becomes very essential in the COVID context. And we have this new arsenal, that is vaccination. Again, vaccination role for the mothers, for the babies, like how that babies, of course, they get the transmitted immunity. For the mothers and the family members, how that will play a role. Then of course, minimizing personal contacts as far as possible. Follow-ups have to be done remotely or telephonically. And this current crisis is unique. The situation is still evolving. Our knowledge and experience we are still gathering. So in this context, our guidelines and the protocols should have all these public health principles in place. And of course, the treatment protocol, the antibiotics, minimizing the transmission, all these are issues which we have to seriously deal with. I do hope our experts will be able to throw lights on this and the queries will be answered. Thank you very much. Dr. Devrari, you are...
Thank you, Dr. Sumita Ghosh, for your kind words. I know all the pediatricians, medical officers, and nurses who have joined. We know within the resource constraint, we will try to optimize care, ensuring respectful quality care for mother and newborn babies both together. Thank you for addressing all of us. So may I ask Dr. Luigi, the Chief of Health Section, India Office, UNICEF, to say a few words? Luigi?
Good afternoon, Professor Devrari, and good afternoon, Dr. Ghosh, ma'am. Nice to see you. and good afternoon to all the experts who are here today. I really don't want to take long because all those who are attending this webinar are here to listen to the experts. But I think I want first and foremost to extend on behalf of UNICEF a huge word of thanks to each and every healthcare provider who in this country under this tsunami is not shying away from providing all of his or her support to help patients who are suffering. I also want to thank this joint effort and the experts who are making the time to be with us today, because as much as COVID might be seen as a marginal issue in a way for needs, and this is what we're doing today, to continue taking care of the fact that women and children, particularly at the time of birth, need care, and now more than ever they need safe care, but they need to be put in a position, to understand the basics. So families need to understand the basics, the simple questions. There are a lot of misinformation is floating around, breastfeeding, what to do with the baby, the symptoms and the like. And second, is to alleviate the fears of family need or find ways to access alternative forms like teleconsultations for accessing the expertise they need to take care of the babies and of themselves at the very delicate time of birth. At the end of the day, as I think I keep saying, no matter how devastating this is, thankfully, babies keep coming to life, COVID or non-COVID. And we need collectively, and I think that's why we're here today, to keep as much as we can protecting them and giving them a safe chance to start their lives and healthy and well-nourished and then grow through it. And I, again, let me just close by thanking each and every of the experts for building time. I know how busy you are for addressing the questions that will follow. Very last words, as usual and as always, anything we can do to support the agenda of women and children for drops we can spare, please do not hesitate to knock at our doors. UNICEF is always standing on the side of Ministry of Health, AIMS, WHO and other partners to help women and children to sail through this very, very hard moment for the world and for the nation. Over to you, Professor Diorari, and thanks again for this session.
Thank you, Luigi. So I think before we start the frequently asked question session, I requested 3 neonatologists who are involved in COVID care for mother and newborn in 3 of the states to say a few words about their experience with second wave for COVID. So may I ask first Srinivas Murki to tell us from Telangana experience what he is seeing for COVID second wave and how it is different from the first wave.
Thank you, sir, and thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, COVID-1 was more of, I think, adult disease, and we saw babies born to COVID positive mother. But we have hardly seen any newborn getting affected from perinatal transmission. But there were babies who got transmitted after the neonatal period, after the first 1 week. Most of them came with some respiratory illness or diarrhea in the first phase. Now, when we compare the COVID positive versus COVID negative born to COVID positive mothers, these babies had higher symptoms, more symptoms, but mostly not relevant to COVID. COVID was just a bystander. Now we are going to see the second wave. Now in the second wave, we have seen that there is a rapid transmission. We have seen lot of adults are getting affected. Gradually, we are seeing in children, and we are yet to see symptomatic COVID in the newborn. But we started seeing babies born to COVID positive mothers. So we are yet to see symptomatic newborns, sir. Maybe in another 1-2 weeks we'll start seeing them, because we are seeing this significantly in the pediatric population now.
Thank you, Srinivas. So may I ask Dr. Naveen Jain from Kerala?
Sir, good afternoon, and good afternoon to everybody in the meeting. Thank you for trying to take the subject ahead of the second wave really hitting the newborns. We have seen in the first wave about 100 plus pregnant women. Some of them were symptomatic with fever and throat pain, and some were just tested positive as a part of the hospital practice to screen them. But throughout that whole year, fortunately, none of the mothers became sick enough to get ventilated or get oxygen. Similarly, all the babies were negative. They were nursed with the mother for the first 5 to 6 hours, where we have a separate ward for COVID positive mothers delivering and continuing to have the care of baby and mother together. After 6 hours, most mothers and babies had to get separated for a few hours, 1 or 2 days, because the mothers had to go to a larger ward where more other non-pregnant COVID patients were also in single rooms or in a ward. There, it was not possible to take care of baby and mother together. But after that 48 hours, the mothers were discharged to home for home care, and they continued to breastfeed the baby with mask and hand hygiene. And we did not see even a single COVID positive or symptomatic baby in the last whole year. We did manage a few COVID positive babies who were referred from other hospitals. Only 2 babies were ventilated. They improved with just supportive care, required none of the medications like remdesivir or steroids or immunoglobulin. They did not even require any testing because they did not show patterns of DIC-like illness. This month, we have seen large number of families getting tested positive, and along with that, babies also getting fever, but not more than that. And some of the fevers have lasted for 5 days, 6 days. Occasional cough was reported, but none of the babies were sick enough to require hospitalization. We have been managing them with telehealth and reassuring the families that if the babies continue to be active and feeding well when the fever settles, they need not come back to the hospital. Just like Srinivas said,
Thank you.
he has seen pediatric cases with multi-inflammatory syndrome, but none of the newborns were sick in the same fashion.
Thank you, Naveen, highlighting how they are managing patients in KIMS Hospital, Kerala, which is one of the private institutions which is very famous in Kerala. So let me ask Atul Jindal. Atul Jindal is from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. So Atul has been working with COVID children and adults and newborn babies. To say a few words, Atul.
Thank you, sir, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity for sharing our experience. So last year we saw almost 170 odd pregnant ladies, and they were having only mild symptoms. There was no mortality, and we did saw around 8 to 10 babies who were completely asymptomatic. And all of these babies got positive only in the second week of the, none of them were perennially acquired. In this wave, we have seen almost like 40 mothers till now. And during the last 2 weeks, we have seen 5 mortality also among the mothers. All these mothers were in their second trimester, one was in the first trimester. We have seen 4 babies till now who have come up to be positive. Out of these 4, one was symptomatic, 1.2 kg. This baby was actually from, is in Bijapur SNC, and I do telementoring there. So this baby had prolonged fever and was not gaining weight. Sepsis was ruled out. And finally, I had to use a small dose of steroid for 3 days, and then subsequently baby was fine. So otherwise, most of these babies have been absolutely fine.
Thank you, Atul. So thank you, Naveen, Atul, and Srinivas Murki for sharing your experience with COVID patients. We'll get to the frequently asked question very soon. I would like to make it very clear to all healthcare professionals who are providing care for mother and newborn babies. I remember back in 1980s, while there was HIV which entered in India, we started taking universal precautions, and then some medications came, and taking universal precautions for healthcare delivery became a part of routine. And it looks that COVID is going to stay with us for years together. What we have to do is we have to still follow universal precautions. In addition, wear N95 mask so that you do personal protection while you are taking care of any child, any newborn baby, any mother. And if it is COVID positive, then you have to protect yourself with full PPE. Now, with these words, we would start the FAQ session. And I'm so happy that for this session, we have experts from the country. And I know most of you know them. Dr. Praveen Kumar from PGI Chandigarh, who is head of Department of Neonatology. Suman Rao, she is professor at St. John's Medical College. Deepak Chawla, he is professor of Neonatology, Department of Pediatrics at GMCH Chandigarh. Dr. Aparna Sharma, she is Associate Professor, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Their center also is a WHO collaborating center. And then my colleague, Dr. Annu Sachdeva, she is Associate Professor, Department of Pediatrics. So what we are going to do is we are going to have some common questions which normally parents ask us. And I'll ask panelists to respond to that. But before that, we know we have to talk about evidence-based literature. It is lacking at this point of time, but we were so lucky that under National Neonatal Forum of India, we were able to make perinatal guidelines for COVID along with FOXI and Indian Academy of Pediatrics. NNF also started National Registry for enrolling mothers and newborn babies who are COVID positive to look at the outcomes. And these are guidelines which were published on 26th of March last year, revised in May 2020. And I'm very sure under the leadership of Dr. Praveen Kumar and Deepak Chawla, we will come out with the third guidelines, which will address wave 2 of COVID. So my first question goes to Dr. Praveen. Praveen, as you listened and you have seen, what is your impression about this problem of COVID during the second wave during this present time?
Thank you, Dr. Derari, and good afternoon, everybody. I think there is an impression going around that this time younger patients are getting affected overall, and maybe more pediatric patients are coming, and hence obviously more newborns. It's too early to say. The data is very limited, but whatever preliminary data I could look at, I don't think there is any change in the perinatal transmission, which means the newborn will get positivity within first 3 days of life. However, if we look at the type of COVID which is happening, and everyone knows now the transmissibility of the current strain is very high, and virtually all the family members are getting affected if one gets affected. And hence, any family who has a neonate at home, the newborn have become at higher risk. So possibly from home we will be getting little more newborns. What has also been reported by some of the colleagues from the states where the wave started earlier, that is Maharashtra and Gujarat, that they have already started seeing newborns with the multisystem inflammatory syndrome. Anecdotal, but maybe little more numbers. So I think people said maybe somebody has seen 4, somebody 5, and so on. So it's quite likely. And also I think since many people by now have antibodies, either for whatever reason, so it's likely that over next month or two, many of us may end up seeing more neonates with MIS, and more neonates coming from home with some symptoms. These symptoms typically have been diarrhea and some fever. But MIS obviously is the dangerous one. Other symptoms have been mild and neonates have done well. So I think it looks like maybe more, but we have to carefully watch for it.
Praveen, what do you think? Because if in the community the positivity rate is so high and the child may be having some other symptom, he may turn out to be COVID positive. Do we have to treat COVID or treat the primary disease in the patient?
Yeah, so that's I think a very, very important question, because in the first wave also, when we've analyzed the data, or even if you look at the literature, so all the symptoms which have been reported are basically non-specific, which would be seen in any newborn otherwise. And whether it's incidentally the COVID test came out to be positive, and whether it had any contribution to the symptoms is debatable. This is also corroborated by the fact that whenever we have tested newborns, let's say we're going for some procedure, going for echo or surgery in routine, many of them turn out to be positive and they are really asymptomatic. So that has to be kept in mind. I think the only scenario where possibly COVID is causing symptoms is in very, very few. I mean, you can count on fingers, very, very few babies where definitely, other infections, other causes have been ruled out, viral load has been documented, and babies have manifested inflammatory markers have been very high. So those, I think, are very, very rare cases, not the usual type.
So, Praveen, you published with the help of National Neonatal Forum Network your registry for newborn babies with COVID positive, born to COVID positive mother. Can you summarize what the results were?
Yeah, so this NNF started a online COVID registry in the month of March end last year. So basically, we have data from April to September 2020, which was analyzed and published in this paper in Indian Pediatrics, which is already online and very soon should be in the print version also. In this paper, we had around data from 1,700 mothers who were COVID positive, so newborns born to them. And we also had around, I think, 40 odd outbounds. So the experience from this registry was basically that most newborns do very well, and most newborns remain asymptomatic. However, the prematurity rate was definitely higher. So we had around, if you could show the previous slide, so previous one. Yeah, so we had around 21% prematurity rate, which is quite similar to the UK registry or the previous systematic reviews. And the chances that such a baby will be symptomatic were nearly 5 times compared to a baby whose mother would be COVID negative. And hence, they also required more resuscitation and maybe all the other typical symptoms of a newborn, like distress and apnea and seizures. But you have to keep in mind that since the prematurity was so high, that all these symptoms possibly could be related to prematurity or perinatal events themselves. Amongst the outbound, we had almost similar symptoms: respiratory, GI, fever. And again, amongst the outbound who were tested, 50% were asymptomatic, only 50% had them. There have been around 10 case reports of MIS, which we had compiled from different people across India, in which I think only maybe 5 or 6 are really convincing, rest 4 are possibly debatable. And in these 5 or 6 babies, the symptoms were like fever, diarrhea, and myocardial dysfunction and shock were very prominent in these babies. But overall, I would say majority of babies were asymptomatic and did well. And I think that is visible in the registry, the graph which we'll be showing. Yeah, this is the graph. So this is the current graphics from the registry, which is automatically generated. This does not include around 450 babies, which we included in the paper because somehow people didn't have the time to enter data online. So as you can see, the test positivity rate in the newborn was very low, maybe around 4.5, ranging from 3% to 4.5%. And majority of these women were actually asymptomatic and tested positive because of the routine screening policy which was taking place. And most of them delivered in tertiary care government hospitals. Next one, please. Yeah, and this again basically shows the majority of people have been roaming in these babies with the mothers and breastfeeding. Of course, if mother herself is unwell and is in the ICU, then babies cannot be, kept with them. And majority of these babies have been asymptomatic, and those who had symptoms are generally related to prematurity, and the outcomes have been generally very good.
So that means it is very clear. Majority of the babies, even if they are COVID positive on RT-PCR, they are going to be asymptomatic. Symptoms are very, very rare. But you may have symptoms due to the other associated conditions which the newborn baby may be having. It may be prematurity related, complication, asphyxia, RDS. So those are the other associated condition with which the child may present and he may be COVID positive. Praveen, you mentioned about multi-system inflammatory syndrome in newborn babies, MIS-N. Can you tell us what are the criteria which should be fulfilled if you have to label a baby with multi-system inflammatory syndrome in the newborn baby?
I mean, since the reports have been so few, at the moment, we do not have a kind of well accepted criteria for newborn. We have been following the children's criteria, which obviously will not be fully applicable. But generally, what people have been following, or when we classified, we said, okay, if we have documented RT-PCR to be negative in the baby, but antibodies are positive to COVID, and there is the associated history of COVID in the mother, or you documented antibodies in the mother also, which means you're presuming there is a transmission of antibodies from the mother to the baby. And then the babies are presenting with fever, some other non-specific symptoms, but the definite things have been the inflammatory markers, the ferritin and the CRP, IL-6, they have been raised phenomenally, not simply in few, and the sepsis has been ruled out confidently. And then echocardiography and all have shown myocardial dysfunction. So these are the cases which we have been able to confidently say, okay, this is definitely MIS.
And if it is MIS in the newborn, how do you treat? Can you tell 2-3 drugs which can be life-saving?
Yeah, so I think, again, the experience is limited. Everybody is using different drugs. But in general, the mainstay will be steroids and intravenous immunoglobulins. These are the 2 drugs which people have used and have been confident. Other drugs, some people have tried to use, not so good experience. So I think early steroids and maybe IVIG, that would be the 2.
Thank you, Praveen. Now we are getting to one more area which is so important for us to know, and it relates to how do you provide care, which has to be a quality care, if a mother is COVID positive. Can we give breast milk to the baby? Is it safe? Can we keep mother-newborn diet together? And the second question is, what are the current WHO recommendations for breastfeeding for COVID positive mothers and for doing kangaroo mother care for low birth weight babies? And I know Dr. Suman is very passionate about both these areas. So the question goes to Dr. Suman Rao from Bangalore.
Thank you, sir, and good afternoon to everyone. Yes, breast milk is very safe even in newborns born to COVID positive mothers. And it is life-saving, it is essential. We got information initially when COVID came into the picture, people had this knee-jerk reaction of separating mothers and babies, not using breast milk with the fear that this can transmit the infection. But one of the early papers was from New York, which looked at taking precautions, but continued breastfeeding, giving skin-to-skin contact at birth, but with all the precautions, and they tested rigorously at birth, subsequently in the first, and even at 14 days. And they found from this paper from Lancet Child and Adolescent Health that there was no single baby among the 120 mothers who were COVID positive. After that, in the past year, there have been several papers which have looked at breast milk and tried to see whether there is this virus in breast milk. Most of the studies have concluded that transmission from breast milk is not likely to happen. Only rarely have they found antigens, but this has not been sustained. Maybe it was a contamination. And when they have done both antigen studies and culture, they have seen that probably these antigens which were present were non-replicative, and none of them have shown that viral cultures have been positive in breast milk. So now we have evidence that breast milk is safe even in newborns born to COVID positive mothers. it is not only safe, but it's very important to promote and support breastfeeding during these times. Because first of all is the concept of fear, which is there not only in the families, but also in the healthcare personnel. And therefore, we need to tell them that it's very, very unlikely that the transmission can occur through breast milk as such. We have a study from India, from JIPMER, which has looked at 30 COVID positive mothers, and all of them were negative consistently in the antigen. So we need to do extra to support the mother. In fact, when the WHO recommendations, which came out as early as June last year, has shown that we need to protect and promote breastfeeding, but with precautions. So what are these precautions that breastfeeding mothers should do? We should continue to room in babies and mothers together, but the precautions are the 3 Ws. One is wear a mask. Wearing a mask during breastfeeding is very, very important. Second is frequent hand wash. Wash your hands, use sanitizers, especially before holding the baby, after holding the baby, and ensure that the hands are clean. And third W is to wipe and disinfect the areas. And if the mother has coughed on her chest, she could wipe her breast before feeding, but routine cleaning of the breast is not needed. Very important that we need to support the mothers, and therefore it's also recommended that when babies and mothers are roomed in, maybe another adult who is COVID negative and healthy can support the mother in this. If the mother is sick or if the baby is sick, then express breast milk can be collected hygienically and then fed to the baby by a caregiver who is COVID negative. So during these times, supporting breastfeeding is absolutely vital, and rooming in and breastfeeding should be continued, because the effects of not breastfeeding are so harmful, not only to the sick and small babies, but also to the normal newborn. Now coming to Kangaroo Mother Care. Yes, sir.
So I think you made it very clear and showed us the evidence that breast milk is safe. On the other hand, it gives antibodies to the baby, which may be against COVID. There is no virus transmission, which is there. And we have to take precautions that the mother need to wear mask, disinfect the surfaces, wash hands, and she can safely give breastfeeding to a baby. And that the benefit of that outweigh not doing it. Okay. Now, my next question is on about Kangaroo Mother Care and skin to skin at the time of birth. So what is your take on this, Suman?
So Kangaroo Mother Care is a total antithesis of social distancing, which is practiced during these times. It's all about skin to skin contact for 24 hours a day. And there was a lot of hesitancy among health personnel to do it. That was when in WHO, we looked at a modeling estimate to see what is the risk of doing Kangaroo Mother Care to the newborns. And by this modeling estimate, it's very clear that by doing Kangaroo Mother Care, yes, there is a risk of getting the infection of COVID in the baby, but the risk of dying is very, very low, even if we consider that the baby can get COVID, because COVID is so mild in the newborns. Only around, if you look at globally, less than 2,000 lives will be lost by the COVID infection when KMC is practiced. On the other hand, because Kangaroo Mother Care has such a huge benefit in reducing mortality among the small babies, the life saved by Kangaroo Mother Care is more than 1.25 lakhs. So it's very evident that the difference in life saved when you assess the risk benefit of KMC and COVID is more than 630-fold. So we definitely should promote Kangaroo Mother Care. But having said that, there are a lot of challenges. One is the mother may be isolated, the small baby is in the NICU. And therefore, from our survey, which we had published in BMJ Open, it was seen that not only is Kangaroo Mother Care compromised in the suspect and the positive mothers, but even when the mother's status was unknown or negative, even then, to some extent, Kangaroo Mother Care practices were compromised. Duration of KMC was reduced, and babies were discharged very early because of the risk of infection. So there is a need that we need to promote Kangaroo Mother Care during these times. Yes, if the mother is sick and the mother may not be allowed to come into the NICU. So having a surrogate or a caregiver who is negative and who can promote kangaroo care for the baby and help in feeding express breast milk is important. So in short, even for the COVID positive mothers and her baby, zero separation to the norm, it should be the norm, even and especially during this pandemic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Suman, highlighting that we need to practice KMC also, and the mother must take precaution. Again, she has to wear mask. This picture is showing a mother without a mask. So we need to make sure the mother wears the mask while she's caring. Though COVID is like asymptomatic, occasional babies will have mild disease. Very few will end up with severe COVID. So I think babies are lucky. They will be majority of the time asymptomatic or even have only mild illness. Now, let me ask Dr. Annu Sachadeva. Annu, what should be done for routine immunization services during COVID time? And what should be the schedule for immunization for a child who is due for booster? And what should be done for that? Annu?
Thank you, sir, for that question. So I have two things to say here. One thing is, globally, national immunization programs are at a risk of suspension because of two reasons. One is each health system has its own constraints, and second is the importance of physical distancing. The second point which I want to stress is that there is evidence which suggests that the number of deaths which are prevented by sustaining routine childhood immunization outweigh the risk, the excessive risk of deaths because of COVID-19, which may happen because of vaccination-associated clinic visits. So that means, that is a very important carry home, routine childhood immunization should be sustained as much as possible while you are considering your staff shortage, your logical constraints, your reallocation of resources, and other issues during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it should follow the same schedule as you were following pre-COVID-19 era. So immunization as per schedule, whether it is booster, whether it is other immunization, has to be followed given your constraints and other issues. The reason is that, one, it is important, and second, the deaths which are prevented by immunization definitely outweigh the risk of COVID-19 deaths because of your immunization clinic visits.
So I think we need to remember one more evidence, which is a published evidence by World Health Organization, that following Ebola epidemic in Africa, what happened? A lot of children missed measles immunization. And then what happened? Later on, a lot of children died due to measles. Large number of thousands died due to measles. So if we don't follow the immunization schedule, I think we are waiting for another maybe problem which may occur after some time. So routine essential services, especially immunization, must continue even during the time of pandemic. But we will have to see, as Annu mentioned, how do we do it in a resource constrained environment. So my next question is to Aparna. Aparna is an obstetrician, and I think this is a question which Luigi also referred to. What should be done for vaccination of pregnant and lactating women, Aparna, especially for COVID, I am asking. What should be the vaccination schedule for pregnant women? Over to you, Aparna.
So, a very good afternoon to all of you. And I think, sir, this is a very... Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah.
Yes. So, a very good afternoon to all of you. And I think this is a very, very pertinent question. So, I would like to say that, there are two very important questions here that, first of all, should we get vaccinated, the pregnant women be vaccinated for COVID-19? If yes, which vaccine? So I think there is enough evidence now. The evidence is starting to emerge. The first is about the safety of vaccine, and the second is about the immunogenicity of the vaccine. So when we talk about the safety of the vaccine, we have the safety of the mRNA vaccine. The evidence has come from US. And in the women who have completed, around 800 women who have completed their pregnancy, the outcomes are comparable to the women who have not received the vaccines. And the outcome in terms of pregnancy outcome, the maternal outcome, the neonatal outcome is much similar to the women who have not received the vaccine, that in terms of preterm birth, in terms of the growth, the small for gestational age babies. So the outcome in among the women who received vaccine in their third trimester was mostly the similar as the women who did not receive the vaccine. So in terms of safety, we have some evidence from 800 women. Now, in terms of immunogenicity also, it has been seen regarding the mRNA vaccine that the women in the reproductive age group who have received, sir, can I have the next slide, please? So this also has come just a few days back, that the women who have actually received the vaccine during pregnancy or during breastfeeding, they have actually generated good immune response as compared to the women who have had COVID infection during pregnancy. So in this particular study, there were 84 pregnant women, 31 lactating women, and it was compared to 16 non-pregnant women. And these among these participants, the sera was tested at baseline after the second dose and 2 to 6 weeks post the second dose of vaccine and at delivery. And in all of these patients, it was noticed that the vaccine-induced antibody titers in pregnant and lactating women compared to the non-pregnant women, so it was similar. That means the efficacy of immunogenicity of the vaccine was good even in the pregnant women, and it was significantly more than that induced by the natural infection by COVID-19. So, and the vaccine-generated antibodies were actually present in the umbilical cord blood and breast milk samples. So that means it is actually protecting the baby also. So what else do we want? So it is protecting the mother, it is protecting the baby. So they concluded that the mRNA vaccines generated robust humoral immunity in pregnant and lactating women with immunogenicity and reactogenicity, which is similar to that observed in the non-pregnant women, and the protection is actually transferred to the neonates via placenta and breast milk. So where do we stand now? The RCOG guidelines, they tell us, among the latest update, which was they have in February 2021, and they tell us very, very clearly that the pregnant and the breastfeeding women should be offered COVID-19 vaccines. So the COVID-19 vaccines should not be withheld from the pregnant and the breastfeeding women, and they tell it in as many words very, very clearly. Even the SOGC guidelines from Canada, they also say it very, very clearly that women who are pregnant or breastfeeding should be offered vaccination at any time during pregnancy if they are eligible and no contraindications exist per se to vaccination, which are the usual contraindications. So pregnancy should not be considered a contraindication to vaccination. Even FIGO, this statement is also there that we should support vaccination in pregnancy. Now, we come to the very important point, that is, what is the status in our country? So as of now, the current status by MOHFW, our country, still holds this statement on its website, which says that one of the contraindications for vaccination in our country is pregnancy and lactation. Although it is unfortunate, but it is the current status. So it is time. So we have to know that this is the current status. So, but we need to understand that it is going to change soon. It has to change soon. It has to come out from the professional organization. But we are at a stage, then we need to ask more questions and somehow understand that this needs to change soon.
So, Aparna, my suggestion is both the WHO Collaborating Center at AIIMS New Delhi, we should write a letter to ICMR and Ministry of Health, Health Secretary, trying to tell them that we need to give vaccination. But the next question they will say is, what about Covaxin and Covishield vaccine, which are getting used in the country? Do we have the data, or are you aware of some studies which are happening on pregnant women and lactating women on these vaccine?
Right, sir. So currently there is no data, but what we have to say and what we have to do is two things. First of all, we know that it is an inactivated vaccine, and we have had experience with such vaccines in pregnancy. So we know that, like it is like an influenza vaccine, and we are used to giving influenza vaccines in pregnancy. So this is something which is not new. So it has to be an informed decision between the client and the provider. So this is something, so it has to be, and plus we have to keep monitoring the adverse effects. So this is something.
So I think the message is for the mRNA vaccine, it looks like it is safe for lactating women and pregnant women. We need to find out about Covaxin, which is going to be used in the country in large scale, and Covishield also. And then only some recommendation will come from the Ministry of Health and ICMR. We can tell them they have to look into it and then take an informed decision. Is it okay, Aparna?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So we have to wait.
So this is the most next question for professionals is, we know at this point of time how resource constrained we are for doing COVID testing. We make guidelines that do this test on this day, repeat the test. But at many of the places, we don't have the kits for doing the tests. But as academicians, we must know what is ideal. And then we have to customize based on wherever we are working. So my next question goes to, Deepak Chawla. Number one is, what test should be done, Deepak, to prove that this baby has COVID? And what is the time to test the baby who is born to COVID positive mother? Over to you, Deepak Chawla.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please, sir. Yeah, so as of now, because of low sensitivity of the RAT test, it is not recommended to do the RAT test, and the test to be recommended to be used in neonates for diagnosis of COVID infection is RT-PCR. Now, there are three scenarios in which one may do testing for COVID infection in newborn babies. First is if a mother with COVID infection, COVID-19 active infection, or which is detected within 14 days before birth of the baby, delivers a baby. So in that case, baby should be tested. Now, at what time to be tested? Ideally, first test should be done within 12 to 24 hours after birth. This test will help in ruling out vertical transmission. As Dr. Praveen showed us from the NNF registry, as of now, what we know that vertical transmission is very uncommon, maybe less than 4 to 5%. So, but to look at these, if possible, if facilities are there, one test should be done within first 12 to 24 hours. And if first test is negative, then a repeat test can be done after 5 to 10 days of birth. Okay, or one can do test earlier than 5 to 10 days if baby becomes symptomatic. For example, baby did not have any distress or any signs like fever after 24 to 48 hours, but later on, baby develops these signs, symptoms, then one can do repeat testing even before 5 to 10 days have elapsed. So for babies who are born to COVID positive mothers, ideally 2 tests, but if there is a issue with the availability of kit, then at least 1 test between 5 to 10 days should be done.
Deepak, my question to you is, suppose I do only 1 test within 24 hours. Is there any point in repeating a test on day 5 to 10? And what is the rationale behind repeating the test on day 5 to 10?
So only rationale is that because vertical transmission is uncommon, but still horizontal transmission can occur. So usually we room babies as recommended by World Health Organization and by different organizations, that babies who are born to COVID-19 mother, and if both mother and baby are stable, baby should be roomed in with mother, although she has to follow the appropriate COVID appropriate behavior, but still she has to, we need to test babies after 5 to 10 days, so to see whether any postnatal transmission has occurred.
And the
second thing
reason
is
for that, Deepak, the reason also may be the baby may catch infection later on. And on day 7, he may be positive. And then
Yes, sir.
we need to make sure that the baby is going to be isolated. Otherwise, he will spread infection to the other family
Yeah.
member. Am I correct?
So many, yes, definitely, sir, because babies are many times cared for by other caregivers, maybe also grandparents, and who are at risk of severe infection. So it is important to know whether baby is infected or not. Even if it does not pose any risk to the baby, but baby can pose risk by transmitting to other family members. Second scenario in which one can do testing in babies, neonates, is if baby has been exposed at any postnatal age to a COVID positive person. For example, in today's scenario, when large number of people are coming positive, so mother or father or any other family member may become COVID-19 affected. And as per recommendation of the government, if there is a significant household exposure, then baby has to be tested between 5 to 10 days. And if baby develops symptoms earlier, like any other adult contact, test can be done even earlier than 5 to 10 days. Third important category, which causes confusion in many scenarios, is if outborn babies or babies from home come to emergencies with symptoms. Symptoms may be fever, maybe diarrhea, maybe lethargy. So sepsis-like symptoms or pneumonia-like symptoms, then should be tested. So if baby has presented with onset of symptoms beyond 48 hours of life, because within 48 hours, most common reasons of sign symptoms are perinatal issues like transient tachypnea or congenital pneumonia or HMD. So these are the early onset sepsis. But if these symptoms are appearing after 48 hours, and the symptoms are like acute respiratory or sepsis, like fever, lethargy, poor feeding, seizures or diarrhea, vomiting, then baby should be tested. But remember that most common reason of admission, what we see in usual level 2 hospitals, is jaundice, neonatal jaundice. Jaundice alone without any symptoms or sepsis or fever, lethargy is not an indication of doing RT-PCR unless baby is exposed to COVID positive person. So if sepsis-like symptoms, pneumonia-like symptoms, then these babies should be admitted in a SARI ward, and immediately at admission, RT-PCR can be done. And if negative, and index of suspicion is high that there is history of contact, then one may repeat it after 24 to 48 hours also. But these babies should be tested for COVID-19 infection.
Thank you, Deepak. So we know the challenges in getting RT-PCR done. The report also doesn't come on time. And then if we are sending two times, again is a problem. So we need to keep that in mind. At many places, we have a lot of problem. You mentioned that rapid antigen test is of no value. What is your take on CBNAT in place of RT-PCR? Because at a lot of places, people are doing cartridge-based nucleic acid test for diagnosing COVID. What is your take on that?
So it can be done. It is better than better than RAT. Even in some, let's say, district hospital where RT-PCR or CBNAT is not immediately available and baby is symptomatic, then even that can be done. But negative RAT will not ensure that baby is not infected. But definitely CBNAT.
We know. So CBNAT is just like RT-PCR, and the advantage is you can get the report within 4 hours, 5 hours, much earlier as compared to RT-PCR. As you rightly mentioned, if you are doing a rapid antigen test on a symptomatic baby, if the test is positive, is good, it says it is COVID. But if it is negative, you have to do the RT-PCR test to be sure that it is not COVID. Am I correct, Deepak?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely.
Okay. So my next question goes to again Aparna. I think this is very, very important for all the obstetricians to know. What are the complications which are seen in pregnant women, Aparna, who suffer COVID? And it becomes all the more important if you tell me it is going to lead to a lot of complications. We need to protect all pregnant women from getting COVID exposure.
Yes, sir. So I think thank you for the question, sir. And I think this is become even more important, and vaccination has become even more important in this context now, because in the last wave, the pregnant women were really not, so seriously affected. And now more and more we are realizing that, this thing has becoming even more serious. Because this is the latest study that was published just a few days back, and they actually looked at 700 pregnant women and compared that with around 1400 pregnant women who did not have COVID. And they reported that, preeclampsia was higher, the risk of severe infection was 3 times higher, the ICU admissions were also higher by a significant amount, and even the risk of death, maternal mortality, was higher in COVID patients. And we anyways know that, the preterm birth, neonatal problems, they are definitely more. So mothers are actually getting more affected. During the last year, we were under this impression that, the mothers are in the reproductive age group, the mothers are younger, so pregnancy is not really affected. But over the time, we have realized that pregnancy is also getting affected. And we had this belief that pregnancy is a slight immunocompromised situation, so it should get affected. And especially if pregnancy is associated with comorbidities, then it is definitely a difficult situation. And in the last few days itself, we have seen mothers coming and, getting severely affected. So we should be starting to get really, really bothered about it. So this is a serious situation, and we should be, really be bothered about it.
So we need to protect all the women who are pregnant from getting exposure to COVID. Very, very important. I still remember last year, while COVID came as a first wave, we started saying mothers are safe, nothing will happen. And Aparna, how hard we had to push that perinatal guidelines for COVID need to come. And mothers and newborn babies are not really safe. Right. And that is a misconception in the mind of the experts who were dealing with COVID at that point of time in the country. You remember that?
Absolutely, sir.
And then we were so lucky that National Neonatal Forum of India took the lead along with Indian Academy of Pediatrics and FOXI for the first time to come out with the guidelines. And the guidelines are now available on the app on mobile phone. This is printed. It is on the NNF website at this point of time. And it tells you how you have to organize your services also for COVID. So very important. And the guidelines which were published are scored as one of the best international guidelines while there was a review which got published on what is the standard of guidelines of different countries. So our guideline of NNF was scored as number 1. I am so happy. And Praveen, congratulations along with Deepak for that. So now my next question goes to Dr. Anu. Very important. Anu, does vertical transmission occur? And if it occurs, how do we make sure and prove that it is a vertical transmission of COVID infection which has occurred to newborn babies? Anu.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So, for the
and please, Anu,
yes,
may I ask all the attendees to please send your questions on WhatsApp 789439997. Let me repeat again, 789439997. Kindly send your questions online because very soon we are going to take online questions. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you, sir. So for the first question, does vertical transmission occur? Well, there is a theoretical risk and there is a biological plausibility. And there are mechanisms. I'll not go into details of those mechanisms. There are case reports. We have evidence from the UCOS study, case studies by multiple case reports by Zeng et al. And Gabriel et al. And it varies between about 1 to 4%, 1 to 5%, some studies say. Now, the issue is, yes, there is a theoretical risk and there is a biological plausibility. But overall, if you see, except for these studies, there are multiple other studies which say that it may not occur. So the question which arises here is, number one, we are still not clear whether this infection took place in utero, number one, intrapartum, number two, or postpartum. Postpartum means baby has been delivered, mother is observing COVID appropriate behavior, baby is nursed in with the mother, or maybe some other adult in the family. So these three things, whether it was in utero, whether it is intrapartum, whether it is postpartum, we are still unclear on this. And we have to focus on where it is, which actually part it is there. So whether it is in utero, intrapartum or postpartum. And we still have to have a lot of work, and upcoming evidence has to look at what are the outcomes in either of these three categories, and what are the syndromes that actually develop. So evidence is coming up and is yet to come for this. So these three categories, as I said, the first one is in intrauterine. So Dr. Deepak also said about this. So if the mother was positive and you detect virus from anything, so you can detect it from the respiratory tract by RT-PCR, from the amniotic fluid or the umbilical cord blood or the baby's blood sample. So if you detected it within the first 24 hours and it is there even after 24 hours, you say that intrauterine transmission has occurred. So first 24 hour sample, it is present, so possibly it is intrauterine transmission. So the second category, so the next slide, sir. So the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So the second category is intrapartum. That means during the time of delivery or early postnatal, meaning it has happened just immediately after the time of delivery. And how did this happen? Because the baby was in contact with the mother, or another person COVID positive but asymptomatic came in contact with the baby within the first during that particular period. Now here, this swab would be positive between 24 hours and 2 weeks. And that is why Dr. Deepak also said that sometimes it will be imperative to test the baby after delivery or whether the neonate is symptomatic. So whether to classify as intrauterine or peripartum or intrapartum, the timing of testing can help you to distinguish between these two ways of possible transmission of the virus from the mother to the baby or from any other adult in the family. Now, if the baby actually takes it from some other adult or the mother in the postnatal period, then the first 24-hour swab is negative and you get a positivity after 24 hours. So irrespective of whatever, the incidence is rare, at least whatever reports we have till now. So what is more important? We reiterate what Dr. Suman Rao said. So you have to room in the baby and the mother together irrespective of this risk, and baby continues to have direct exclusive breastfeeding. So just plotted a table, the next slide. So if you look at the first thing, so if you detect in the initial part from the placenta amniotic fluid within 24 hours and the swab report is positive and this persists even after 24 hours, so there is possible vertical transmission. Fine. And if these both swabs are negative, that means first 24 hours and even after 24 hours, baby is possibly uninfected. If it's a preterm baby, you can actually nurse the baby, bring the baby inside your main NICU and continue care thereafter. However, if one of these swab is positive, it could be suggesting that there is some superficial contamination or transient viremia. In that case, you need to keep the baby under in the suspect area, keep under good observation, and finally take a call by repeating a sample and then taking a call at 5 to 7 days if the baby actually is shedding the virus or is not shedding the virus. So early exposure, we say that the baby is possibly having vertical transmission. If you actually pick up the virus in the placenta, amniotic fluid, cord blood or neonate swab within 24 hours, and we say that the infection is persisting if you detect the virus even after 24 hours.
So it looks like vertical transmission is uncommon. And if someone has to look for and document vertical transmission, it has to be done in research mode at multiple centers. That will need mother's investigation, looking at the amniotic fluid or the placenta, and then looking at the baby. That baby is also swab positive for RT-PCR, and then doing antibodies. So at this point of time, I don't think there is enough evidence to be too much worried about vertical transmission, but I would encourage good tertiary care units to start doing some research dissertation on proving that vertical transmission is occurring or not occurring in COVID positive mothers. Thank you, Anu, for this. And my next question goes to Praveen. Praveen, we know our country, we are resource constrained. If we have to we have a NICU or a place where we treat our newborn babies. How do we organize services for suspect and positive babies because we can't have 3 NICUs for caring for newborn babies in India at most of the places.
Yes, sir. So basically, what we need to look at is that what is the condition of the mother? Is she sick or she is well? Which means can she take care of the baby or can she not? And second is what is the condition of the baby? So baby may be more late preterm and stable baby, or baby could be preterm or maybe sick baby. So if mother is well, then and baby is also well, which means more than 34 weeks stable, baby should be roamed in with the mother, as everybody has been saying, and allowed breastfeeding, etc., with the appropriate precautions. If somehow mother is in the ICU, for example, and she's so sick, but baby is well, the baby still can be kept in the well baby ward along with if you're able to organize a COVID negative family member or a family member who has recovered from COVID already previously. If that is not available, then such baby would have to be managed in suspect area of the unit. For managing these babies who are sick or premature and hence they need NICU care or SNCU care, we would have to create one area where we can keep such babies. If you have the facility, you could obviously demarcate it separately. If not, somehow within the same unit, we have to make some makeshift partitions with separate entry and exit and separate staff and donning and doffing facilities. So those babies can be kept in those areas, and what we then do is give them the usual care, do their RT-PCR, and once we prove that baby is negative, quickly move them to the normal NICU area or SNCU area, so that then the resources are available once again. So I think these are the broad principles, but depending on the local availability, facilities, people would have to kind of adapt and how this has to be organized.
So Praveen, this chart has come from where?
So this chart we had created last year when we created the NNF FOGSI IAP guidelines in consultation with the people from the government also, and also looking at the government's document where it had classified the COVID care centers and the 3 kinds of facilities. So keeping that in mind and also keeping in mind that the ground reality often is different, we had kind of by consensus come to this chart, and this has served reasonably well, I think.
Thank you, Praveen, for telling us about that. And I think, may I request each one of you to put your video on and come on screen, because there are a lot of questions which are there on my WhatsApp, which I'm going to ask each one of you. So my first question goes to Aparna. First, second trimester, can we give ivermectin safely to the woman?
No, sir. Ivermectin is not recommended in pregnancy. First of all, I think ivermectin is not much of a role in COVID itself right now. And anyways, in pregnancy, it should not be given.
Yeah, I agree fully with you. Even for a lactating woman, there is no point in giving. First of all, we are doubting the efficacy of ivermectin
Yes,
for
sir.
prevention and treatment of COVID.
Yeah, so I think there is a big question mark on the entire role of ivermectin. Most of the studies which I've done are a little biased itself. So I think we have to question the role of ivermectin, and in pregnancy, no.
So my evidence-based learned neonatologist is Deepak Chawla. So let me ask Deepak Chawla, what is his view on this?
So ivermectin, as of now, there are no studies which prove that it works. Although many state governments are distributing ivermectin tablets in their kids, but as of now, there is no use of ivermectin. It has not proven to be effective in treatment of COVID.
I want to make a comment, Dr. Derari.
Yeah, Praveen.
Just to bring to notice, I'm sure everybody is experiencing the same. So what is happening in reality is that people are going to a chemist, that I have fever, and the chemist is saying, okay, take this ivermectin, no need to do corona test also. That is one. Secondly, very interesting, I hope it's only a pharmacy error. One of my relatives in Lucknow went for second dose of vaccination to a government center and was handed over 4 tablets of ivermectin. So on inquiry, they said, no, this is prophylaxis, you have to take it. So they're surprising.
So I think India is a little bit peculiar. I think we need to be educating more of our healthcare professional, and if we are not able to do that, we have to educate families. Then we have to get to families to educate what is right or wrong, and then they start asking for from the healthcare professional the right information. Anu, Aparna, you want to say something?
No, sir, I completely agree with you. We should stop using non-evidence-based polypharmacy and over-the-counter drugs.
So my next question goes to Praveen. There is a child or a newborn baby who got IVIG for multisystem inflammatory syndrome. When should that child be immunized later on? He is due for his DPT oral polio after third dose. When should we do that?
Yeah. So generally, I think if there's any disease happening in the newborn or any other vaccination being given, so generally we would say give a gap of 4 weeks, and IVIG would have a half-life in that range. So I think minimum gap of 4 weeks should be.
So IVIG will have a half-life of 3 weeks, and then it will start declining. So if you can delay vaccination for 4 to 6 weeks, I think it's comfortable. At the end of 6 weeks, your IVIG antibody will just disappear totally. Half-life is 21 days. Could be prevented. So someone is asking, Aparna, to you, how should a pregnant woman be protected? I think it has to be the same principles which we do for
Yes, sir.
adults.
Yes, sir. And we also called it as shielding. So in pregnant women, it is specifically called as shielding because they have to take more care, because it is not just the pregnant women, but the family of the pregnant women, because the source is actually the husband going out, coming out and going out and coming back. So they have to take extra care. They have to be isolated, not isolated, but, just try and take care that they are not in touch with anybody and everybody. So hand hygiene, social distancing, wearing a mask and, washing hands again and again. So I think, and unnecessary visits to the hospital have to be definitely avoided. The 8-visit model has to be reduced, just 4-visit model. First visit in the first trimester, second visit at 20 weeks, third visit at 32 weeks, and the fourth visit at term. So I think from avoid unnecessary visits, come to hospital only 4 times, and if there is a problem. So this is
And talk to doctor on talk to doctor on phone. Telecall.
This is very, very important. ये जो कार्ड लेके नहीं आना है hospital, avoid visits to hospitals. Just talk to your doctors on phone.
Very good. Excellent. Let me ask Aparna, you saw what neonatal community is doing. They have a database, they have a registry, they published it also, they came out with guideline. What the obstetricians are doing for mothers?
So, sir, we are on the way.
I am interested in Indian data, not American data.
No, sir, we have the data of 1,300 pregnant women. It is going to be out in the next 1 month.
Where it will be out? In the publication?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's very important, as I keep on hearing Luigi from UNICEF time and again, we must have some data. Data must be collected in a country like India. That will advise you what you need to do. It will guide you further for taking further actions which have to be there. Unless we have data, we don't know what is happening.
Yes.
And next question is, again, a lot of people are asking on WhatsApp, does COVID in first trimester increase the malformation risk?
No. So there has been enough data now that there is no increase in risk of malformations till now. But what we know is that there is no increase in risk of abortions also. What we have seen, there is no increase in risk of stillbirths also. There is increased in risk of preterm births, as we have seen. But rest of the things, there is no effect on the baby. So this is what we have known from the the large number of pregnancies that have been followed over a period of so many days now, months.
So another question is can women who is planning pregnancy take COVID vaccine?
Yes.
मेरे को लग रहा है you have to do another webinar on maternal
Such a
COVID.
situation, sir. Pregnancy is such a situation. Yes, preconceptionally people should take vaccine. That's not a problem, and there are 2 guidelines on it also. So if you have taken one vaccine, and if you are actually pregnant, you can actually, so because in India we have a problem that they do not allow vaccination in our country, so you might have to skip the second dose also. But the mRNA vaccine, they say that you can continue with the second dose.
Okay. So it looks like someone is asking about do you have some management guidelines for first trimester, second trimester, third trimester?
Yes, sir.
For COVID?
We have a lot of guidelines. We have the FOXI guidelines, and we have our AIMS protocols also for management of pregnancy. We can share that if required.
Okay, so I think I listened to all of you. I think you have given really good messages for all the attendees. So may I ask each one of you to tell one message which the attendees must know and apply in their situation. So let me start with Deepak Chawla.
So we should go back. So I will again reiterate the need of testing and which babies to test. So babies who are born to mothers who have COVID-19 positive, they should be tested first within first 24 hours of birth and second after 5 to 10 days. And babies who are symptomatic and coming to outborn emergencies should also be tested at the time of admission if they are showing symptoms of symptoms similar to COVID-19 infection like fever, lethargy, or pneumonia-like symptoms.
Good. Suman?
My message is during this pandemic, we need to ensure that we protect, promote, and support essential life-saving interventions like breastfeeding, kangaroo mother care, and delayed cord clamping for all babies, including for COVID-positive mothers.
Very good. There is one question related to this. Post-vaccination, can a lactating woman still keep on giving breastfeeding?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So there is no need to refrain from doing breastfeeding even after you have given vaccination to the woman. So Praveen, your message?
So I think as we started this discussion at the beginning, and everybody was asking whether we are seeing more COVID in newborns or more severe. So I think all of us need to be alert to this possibility because of the current strain which is going on, which means maybe we have to emphasize to the family at the time of discharge the same standard precautions, but warn them that newborns also can get, and at home they need to be much more careful. And we need to carefully document whatever cases we're going to see in this wave also. And maybe there's going to be new learning compared to what we saw last year. So everybody is encouraged to continue putting data in the registry, and those who may not have joined may please join the registry.
Thank you, Praveen. Anu?
So, 2 things. Vertical transmission is rare, but theoretically possible. So, do not deny breastfeeding to the baby. Room in the baby with the mother. They room in them together and continue exclusive breastfeeding. And the second thing is even routine immunization for all children. As far as logically possible, meaning given the constraints and the transfer of staff and in COVID areas, so continue routine immunization for kids.
So essential services should be maintained. Praveen, there is one more question, last one coming to you. What is your comment on rooming in if there is no negative person to take care of the newborn baby? Baby is positive.
So first of all,
no negative person.
Yeah. So if first we said if baby is stable, mother is stable, room in the baby with the mother. If the mother is positive, no problem. Continue breastfeeding. The second, we said if mother is sick and not available, then we can try to explore a family member who may be negative or has recovered from COVID. If that is also not possible, then obviously for the small brief period for which baby has to be in hospital for initial 24 hours, you would have to adjust in your observation nursery and try to discharge as early as possible, because often at home people are available, but they're not able to come to hospital to take care. So we try to discharge them quickly.
So even if you are having another family member who has to take in the care, you have to talk, communicate, make sure, explain them about the PPE and the precautions which he or she has to take, and then only engage in the care of that particular newborn baby. Very, very important. So I would say, I think it was a wonderful session, and I'm so happy after listening to all of you. It looks to me that our babies are little lucky that 85 or 90% of the babies are asymptomatic. They are not very, very sick unless they are premature or they have some comorbidity and then COVID infection is occurring. Minuscule number of few babies may land up with you with MIS, multi-system inflammatory syndrome, just like in children and newborn also it can happen. So for that, you have to keep your eyes open and then investigate the baby accordingly and treat accordingly if it is MIS in newborn, because the treatment is different, diagnosis is going to be different. You will need inflammatory marker, you will need antibodies to be done. Your RT-PCR may be positive or negative in that baby. Maybe if you have an echo will have to be done to show myocardial dysfunction. And then the treatment would be giving IVIG or pulse methylprednisolone, because the baby will become normal. So as I said, babies are lucky, families are lucky, but as I hear from my obstetric colleagues, the mothers, if they are pregnant and they are having COVID infection, their outcomes are not good. So we need to make sure the mothers are safe. Shielding is done, as Aparna is trying to tell us. But to all my healthcare professionals who are listening to this webinar, I think we will have to make sure that we follow strict personal precaution and safety while we are taking care of our patient. So it is very important to follow hand hygiene, wear N95 mask, and if you are taking care, sitting in an outpatient, you don't know which patient may be positive, I would say wear double mask. You have an N95 and triple layer all together, and then maintain social distancing. Try to use telemedicine more and more so that less number of patients you have to see and the counseling can be done at home. So that is, and the last message I would say is mother's milk is safe. There is no virus. On the other hand, there are antibodies in mother's milk. So we need to give mother's milk to even if baby is born to COVID positive mother. And then, as Suman said, uptake of coverage of kangaroo mother care in that type of situation. I know it is challenging, but we have models which have been used in Mumbai, KEM Hospital, Sion Hospital. So those type of models for doing kangaroo mother care for low birth weight babies should be practiced. Even skin to skin care should be practiced for newborn babies. So thank you, Dr. Praveen, Deepak Chawla from Chandigarh, Suman Rao from St. John's, and I see Srinivas Murki still logged in from Telangana. He is like CPAP Baba. He keeps on teaching everyone CPAP. And then Dr. Aparna and Dr. Annu from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And I know without having UNICEF on board, all the FAQs, the question online which are getting asked, Vivek from UNICEF is trying to collate and keep on sending to me. Thank you, Vivek, and thank you, UNICEF, and thank you, Ministry of Health, Sumita Ghosh Madam, for joining us for this webinar on COVID, perinatal COVID. More questions were for newborn babies, and as I see, now more questions are coming for mothers. Maybe Aparna and her team has to organize another webinar which has to be on maternal COVID infection. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming at a short notice for this webinar. I enjoyed it. It will be on YouTube. It will be streamed, widely distributed. Thank you once again. Thank you.
you, sir.
Thank you.